Hi, good morning. Okay, well, some of you can actually move up a few more. There are 2 rows here is empty. Why don't you just move up just to fill up the front so those who will come a bit later can just come in to the back. Yeah? Can you come on you? Just move like next. Move. Can occupy these 2 rows. Thanks. Usher them to come. Yeah, can fill up, no problem. At this time, may I just remind all of us here to turn your mobile devices to silent mode, please. Hey, Peter. Maybe we can start. Okay, good morning. We're gathered here this morning at this Raffles City site in remembrance of Singapore's founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, the father of modern Singapore, and a master builder who set the stage for the nation with his tireless contribution. Like many other Singaporeans, at CapitaLand, we are deeply saddened by his passing. We will be observing a minute of silence later on as a mark of respect for Mr. Lee. I hope all of you will join us. And also for those who are viewing this proceeding via CapitaLand's YouTube channel, will also join us in doing so later. Now, Mr. Ng Kee Cho, Chairman, CapitaLand Group, Capital Limited, will now say a few words in memory of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew.
Dear fellow directors of CapitaLand Group of Companies and staff from CapitaLand subsidiaries in Singapore and beyond, thank you very much for participating in this remembrance of the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. This is a period of great grief and sorrow. There is a spontaneous outpouring of tributes from people of all walks of life, from Singapore and beyond, near and far. So much has been said. What more can I say about Mr. Lee Kuan Yew that has not already been said? A friend of mine sent me a poem on Mr. Lee. I think it's from the internet, and it's written by a person known as Mr. Eugene Low. It is a very meaningful poem and reflects very well on the late Mr. Lee and his achievement. I've asked Ling to share this poem with you. But before that, let me share with you a quote from Mr. Lee at a political rally in 1980. The quote goes as follows: "Whoever governs Singapore must have that iron in him, or give it up. This is not a game of cards. This is your life and mine." Unquote. Ling, can you please share the poem?
Sure. There once lived an iron man who graced this sodden path. Deep footprints he had left paved ways where there were none. His thundery voice and rousing speeches hewn from a brilliant mind. From the crucibles of chaos he surged, a giant above his time. Forged in the fires of unrest, in a time where all seemed lost, he towered, defiantly stamping his will, unwavering against the odds. The Iron Man hammered again and again, unremittingly without stop. Like a master artisan, he chiseled, purging grime out from the rock. The small rock that was twice discarded and ravaged in between. "No more," he cried, "not on my watch," he vowed. His furnace burned within. With fiery breaths he breathed, igniting this dim light of the south. This forsaken rock, this abandoned crop, proudly stood out from the dock. 50 years of grit and sweat, the Iron Man would ceaselessly toil, carving out a glittering monolith out of this barren soil. But age calls time upon all men, and even iron begins to rust, as the city prepares a jubilant feast to honor her heroes past. The Iron Man now growingly weak, his furnace growingly dim, the iron within him fully spent, and no more ore in him. Oh, that he will wait and tarry a while to bask in unfettered praise, for simple mortals just like me yearn another glimpse upon his face. Amidst the anxious prayers and tears, as we watched the Iron Man wane, we will remember his temerity, his strength and steel. His work will not be in vain. The same values of a relentless pursuit to eke out a better tomorrow, to imbue the same iron resolute in us for our children to follow. To make roads, bore wells, and plant trees, bearing fruit that we may never hold. For the bountiful harvest we reap today was sown by our pioneers of old. Thank you, Iron Man. Know when you rest beneath this ground, you are the anchor of this state. And whenever we are knocked down, we'll taste the earth and remember your words, and up we'll climb again. For the iron that was in you is now in us, for us to give.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. To me, the foremost thing that came to mind was that Singapore was not meant to be, but yet we are. Not only that, we prospered economically and advanced from third world to first to become the global city that we are today. All this was due to the vision, the courage, commitment, passion, and leadership of one man, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, who was supported by an equally committed, and if I may say so, selfless team of ministers and officials. As a young undergraduate at the then University of Singapore Bukit Timah campus, sometime in 1964, I think, when we were part of Malaysia, I witnessed at close hand this courage, this passion, this combativeness, and the intellectual prowess and sharpness of the man. He was confronted by a group, I believe, from the Socialist Club. He single-handedly took on this leftist group, who was clearly out to oppose and discredit him. Needless to say, he stood his ground, won the day, and more. I'd also experienced the softer side of the man. For example, at a pyramid dinner a couple of years after I stepped down from DBS in 2003, he asked with a show of concern how I was doing. When I told him I was sharing Singapore Power and NTUC income, he said that's good, and added that it was important that I keep mentally active and engaged. So this man is a very humane person too. Many of you and I have benefited from the progress and the prosperity that Singapore has achieved under Mr. Lee. And as a corporation, we all at CapitaLand have benefited from the overall stability and a pro-business environment that has been engendered. He has more than touched all of our lives. We owe a lot to this man. But he's no more. We are gathered here today to pay tribute to a truly unique and an exceptional son and leader of Singapore, who has devoted his whole life in total service to the nation. We mourn the loss and share a deep and profound sense of grief with his family and with all Singaporeans. Honesty, incorruptibility, passion, meritocracy, and pragmatism are some of the key hallmarks of Mr. Lee. These values and qualities resonate very well with us as individuals as well as a corporation. If we live by them, then, in our own way, we would have honored his spirit and his legacy. That would only be fitting and proper. Thank you, MM, for everything. Bless you, bless your soul, may you rest in peace.
Thank you, Chairman. Now, Mr. Lim Ming Yan, our Group CEO, will say a few words to pay tribute on behalf of management and staff. Ming Yan, please.
Chairman, Board of Directors, and colleagues, we are gathered here today to pay tribute to Singapore's founding Prime Minister, the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew devoted his whole life to Singapore. Singaporeans owe much of what we have in Singapore today to Mr. Lee. He created a nation when there was none. This is a quote from Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, sharing his vision for Singapore back in 1965, right after independence, a time when people thought Singapore wouldn't make it. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew was a visionary. Few could see further ahead than he did. And he used his tremendous foresight to position Singapore well and created the international space for Singapore to grow and prosper, benefiting all Singaporeans. One policy which I have personally benefited greatly from was the bilingual policy. There was a lot of debate back then. Just learning Chinese as mother tongue would jeopardize our survival. Knowing only English could cost us our cultural identity and national pride. Mr. Lee was therefore convinced that the bilingual policy is the best strategy for us to compete as well as a pillar in nation building. There was no precedent for such a policy, and we could not draw on the experience of any other country. Singapore had to learn along the way. So in my growing up years in the early 70s, we had to learn English and our respective mother tongues. While I was fortunate to have come from a Mandarin-speaking home environment and did not have to struggle with Chinese like many of my classmates, I still did not understand or fully understand at that time why such emphasis was placed on attaining a certain level of competency in the Chinese language. It was only until 25 years later, when I was posted to China to head CapitaLand's China business, that I fully appreciated the wisdom and foresight of Mr. Lee's bilingual policy. He saw the rise of China early in 1970s, when China was still struggling with its internal strife. He wanted Singapore to be able to effectively engage China. On the few occasions that I was fortunate to meet Mr. Lee while he was visiting China, he was always concerned about how Singaporeans were coping in a Chinese-speaking environment. He was constantly assessing whether Singapore's bilingual policy has been effective. Indeed, bilingualism is a tough policy decision, but it created space for Singapore and made it easier for companies such as CapitaLand to venture and to succeed in China as well as the region. Mr. Lee battled tirelessly against all odds to set the stage for Singapore. People's lives flourish and communities thrive because of his unyielding spirit to build on the land we are all would be proud to call home. I believe some of you would have first-hand experience of how Mr. Lee's relentless pursuit to build up Singapore has enriched your life and the communities around you. The same conviction and purpose also form the core of CapitaLand's spirit. As many of you are aware, fellow Singaporeans have been sharing with us their vision and dreams for Singapore in 50 years as part of CapitaLand's our Build SG 2065 campaign. Ideas about mobile homes, where we no longer have to stay in a fixed place, futuristic high-rise residences, where retractable bridges connect the blocks, mega structures with vertical community space, solar panels, sky gardens, anti-gravitational technology. I'm sharing some of these ideas today to remind ourselves of CapitaLand's commitment to build a better and sustainable environment for Singaporeans. Mr. Lee's aspiration set the stage for Singapore over the past 50 years. He has left us with a legacy, and we must continue to build on it and carry the same passion, dedication, and discipline as we journey forward towards the next 50 years and more. Today, I also want all of us to remember Mr. Lee for the honor that he has accorded to CapitaLand when he graced the groundbreaking of Raffles City, Shanghai in 1996, our very first Raffles City outside Singapore, and the inauguration of the Raffles City, Beijing in 2008. Here is a look back at the message he shared with us at Raffles City, Singapore's 21st anniversary in 2007.
Raffles City was launched 21 years ago on the 3rd of October, 1987, by the then First Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Goh Chok Tong. The site was where Raffles Institution stood for more than a century. I was a student here for 4 years, from 1936 to 1939. In 1980, the late Mr. Hon Swee Sen, then Minister for Finance, officiated at its groundbreaking ceremony and officially named it Raffles City. Raffles City, Singapore transformed the landscape at the very heart of the city. It was bold engineering of its time. and the biggest development project in Singapore, which linked the business district in Shenton Way to a shopping belt in Orchard Road. It was to be a city within a city. Over the past 2 decades, Raffles City has added to the unique Singapore brand and gained international recognition for itself and Singapore. It is an iconic landmark, attracting throngs of tourists, business travelers, shoppers, and diners every day. Its mix of tenants and visitors is a reflection of the cosmopolitan and diverse nature of Singapore. Its continued vibrancy speaks well of the original design of its continuous maintenance and upgrading. A successful Raffles City is not just because of building design and development. To be successful, it has to incorporate experienced tenancy operation and management for hotels, service apartments, shopping malls, and other commercial spaces. These expertise have been built up and exported by Raffles City in CapitaLand. As Raffles City goes global, it is also bringing another made-in-Singapore retailers along. Familiar names like Bread Talk, Bee Cheng Hiang are now in Raffles City, Shanghai. With more Raffles City developments, together with their Singapore retailer tenants established in key cities around the world, they can over time become another marketing icon for Singapore. I congratulate CapitaLand for being a trailblazer for Singapore companies. It is leveraging its real estate and financial capabilities to seek out business opportunities beyond conventional markets, and in the process extend Singapore's footprint into the global arena. CapitaLand has this spirit of enterprise to establish new frontiers, exporting the made-in-Singapore Raffles City concept to other emerging cities in Asia and beyond. Thank you.
CapitaLand's success overseas, especially our flagship Raffles City brand of integrated development, can largely be attributed to Singapore's good standing. For Singaporeans and Singapore companies who have ventured abroad, we would truly appreciate the sense of pride of a Singapore identity. This would almost be impossible for a city-state of our size, if not for the foresight and vision of Mr. Lee. This was reflected in many of his policies, such as bilingualism and his international relations effort. Mr. Lee was never daunted by how small Singapore is. He was determined to make this little red dot of ours a shining beacon on the world map. Mr. Lee's dedication to Singapore and Singaporeans are to be admired and valued. His unyielding spirit and astuteness to be remembered and embodied. And as we keep in mind all that has brought us success, and to make sure we do not forget the past as we build for the future, we are grateful to you, Mr. Lee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ming Yan. And next, several directors of CapitaLand Board would like to say a few words to pay tribute to Mr. Lee. First, I will call upon Mr. Peter Seah, our Deputy Chairman. Mr. Seah.
My friends in CapitaLand Group, as we come together to mourn the passing of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, I think we should also celebrate his life. You know, I've never called him Mr. Lee. To me, he was always PM, and then SM, and then MM. Even after he retired, I call him MM. This is a man who gave us his all. He gave us the Singapore we have today. He worked for it. His whole life was given to Singapore. As I said in my tribute to him in DBS, that he eats, sleeps, and dreams Singapore. This is a son of Singapore, a little island, who became a global name, a global giant, as we can witness from the outpouring of condolences from the leaders from around the world. I have the privilege of knowing him for 20 over years and working with him in GIC for 18 years until he passed away. I've seen and witnessed his brilliance, his vision, his tenacity, his personal side, which his public persona does not show. He's a man with warm compassion, very forgiving of people who make mistakes, but no compromise on integrity. So we were very fortunate to have a leader like him, who after stepping down as Prime Minister, continued to guide and mentor our leaders. Even when he traveled around, I remember in the SGH, he commented that the trees ought to be replanted because they are too short and the buildings have now grown tall. I could stand here and share with you hours about my time spent with him, interacting with him. But I can only say that in his passing, I've lost a role model who inspired me to work for Singapore, a mentor, and if I may dare to call him a friend. So I grieve very deeply. I will miss him. Singapore will miss him. So I pray that the good Lord will take care of him as he rests in eternal peace and bless his family, especially the Prime Minister, and bless Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sia. Now I'll call upon Director Tan Sri Amisham to say a few words. Tan Sri, please.
I'm deeply saddened by the passing of Singapore's founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. As a non-Singaporean, I must say that Singaporean, you're very fortunate to have a visionary leader with tenacity to see that his vision was realized within the shortest period of just one generation. Mr. Lee's pioneering spirit and dedication to discipline not only has its influence on Singapore citizens, but also corporate Singapore. As a director of CapitaLand, I'm glad to see that the company is very much influenced by Mr. Lee's vision. On a personal note, I will never forget Mr. Lee's dedication towards a disciplined society. His dedication towards creating a disciplined society had only shaped Singapore or Singaporean, but also I as an individual. Growing up as a teenager in Johor Bahru in the 60s, I remembered my Malaysian passport was on one occasion stamped NTL if LH. I don't know whether many of you remember that. This was one of the visits to Singapore. That NTL for if LH stand for not to let if long hair. And today, and until today, he has since influenced my life as an individual to be a disciplined individual. More importantly, Mr. Lee has built a strong foundation for his citizen and corporate Singapore to ride the challenge and the challenges ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Next, I call upon our Director, Dr. Pillay, to share a few words. Pillay, please.
I'm sure I'm not alone, but for the past few days, as I'm driving to work, I find myself crying uncontrollably. Why? What did Mr. Lee find in Singapore in 1959? A population of Hokkien, Teochew, and Cantonese-speaking Chinese, Malay-speaking Malays, Tamil-speaking Indians, plus Punjabi and some Hindi. A recipe for a failed state. If you look around the world today, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Yemen, race, language, and religion tear countries apart. This man not only had the vision, but could articulate the vision to build a better Singapore for all Singaporeans, regardless of your race, your language, and your religion. And not only a promise, but to deliver it in one generation. And how did he do this? In a few very simple lessons. Nobody owes you a living. You don't have to be a beggar. But with honest, hard work, and always working to do better, you can have a better life for yourself and for your children. And that's it. And the man did not just promise this, he lived it. He made it part of our DNA. And the best tribute we can give to this man of vision, tenacity, and integrity is that this generation of Singaporeans and the next understand that the fundamentals never change for Singapore. Nobody owes us a living. If we disappear tomorrow, nobody will care. And our future is in our hands. but the price tag is that we have to endlessly do better. For that, I grieve for our leader, the founding father of Singapore.
Dr. Pillay. Let us now bow our heads and observe a minute of silence in honor and in memory of the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew.
Merdeka! Lagi sekali yang bersemangat, merdeka!
He's the founder of the nation. He led Singapore from British colony to independent country. Striving for unity among races and nationalities. And enduring heartbreak in the process.
You see, the whole of my adult life if we lack the guts and the gumption to stand up for ourselves, then I say write it off, forget it.
He stretched to put the fledgling nation on the world map.
And I'm prepared to start all over again. This is entrepreneurship on the political stage, on a national scale. We changed the complexion of Singapore.
Lee was drawn to politics by the brutality he witnessed during the Japanese occupation. The discrimination he experienced studying at Cambridge in England reinforced his belief. He formed the People's Action Party in 1954, enrolling both pro- and non-communists with one common goal: independence from the British. In 1955, Lee won the Tanjong Pagar seat in his first election, after which he never looked back. In 1959, the British granted Singapore self-governance. Lee then led the PAP to win the Legislative Assembly elections and became Singapore's first Prime Minister.
We have in our party men whose integrity and ability have been proved over the years in the struggle to build up the mass movement of the PAP. Their dedication to the cause of an independent, democratic, non-communist, socialist Malaya gives them the drive that will make the machinery of government work efficiently on your behalf.
But self-governance brought with it a slew of challenges. Without the British as their common enemy, fault lines within the PAP widened, and pro-communists in the party left to form the Barisan Socialists in 1961. Divisions deepened further when Lee started to fight for Singapore's merger with Malaysia.
Make the people feel that they are wanted, not stepchildren or stepbrothers, but one in the family and a very important member of the family.
A referendum was called.
In the next few months, we shall settle the constitutional arrangements for merger. In this series of broadcasts, I hope to tell you what merger means, why it's good for all of us.
After intense campaigning and through his persuasive powers, the voters supported the merger. In 1963, Singapore was declared part of the Federation of Malaysia.
Now I, Lee Kuan Yew, Prime Minister of Singapore, do hereby proclaim and declare on behalf of the people of Singapore that as from today, the 16th of September, 1963, Singapore shall forever be a part of the sovereign, democratic and independent state of Malaysia, founded upon the principles of liberty and justice, and ever seeking the welfare and happiness of our people in a more just and a more equal society.
But the euphoria was short-lived. The PAP wanted a Malaysian Malaysia, while UMNO, Malaysia's ruling party, believed in Malay supremacy. Despite Lee's efforts to safeguard the merger, the situation became untenable when riots broke out between the Malays and the Chinese in Singapore.
And these differences take so many forms and are of so many kinds that it has not been possible to resolve them. And so we decided that we must part company.
Now that Singapore is a sovereign
On August 9, 1965, Singapore was separated from Malaysia.
Every time we look back on this moment when we signed this agreement which severed Singapore from Malaysia, it will be a moment of anguish. I mean, for me, it is a moment of anguish because all my life, you see, the whole of my adult life, I had believed in Malaysia, in merger, and the unity of these two territories. You know, as a people connected by geography, economics, and ties of kinship, would you mind if we stop for a while?
Lee's resilient spirit prevailed. Putting the pain he endured behind him, he started to rally the people and began the arduous climb towards nationhood.
And we will set the example. This country belongs to all of us. We made this country from nothing from mud flats. Here we make the model multiracial society. This is not a country that belongs to any single community. It belongs to all of us. This was a mud flat, swamp. Today, this is a modern city. 10 years from now, this will be a metropolis. Never fear.
Lee worked tirelessly with his able team to secure Singapore's future. National service was introduced to build up its own defense quickly. But in 1968, out of the blue, Britain announced its intention to withdraw its troops from Singapore. Lee feared for Singapore's security and economy.
The security of the whole region will be very seriously jeopardized unless some rapid rearrangements are made to ensure continuing security, without which there is no confidence, and without confidence, the boom that we have been having in industrial expansion, so much so now that we haven't got one single industrial site vacant.
To grow the economy, Lee made links with the developed world and encouraged foreign investments. And in less than 40 years, the World Bank reclassified Singapore from a less developed to a developed country. Lee focused his efforts on providing a better life for Singaporeans. To this end, no feat was too difficult for him. Lee went as far as transforming the once foul-smelling Singapore River into a glistening waterway. And to make Singapore more self-sufficient in its water needs, he defied the elements, preserving every drop of water for drinking. Befriending nature seemed to come easily to Lee. His green initiative culminated in the launch of the breathtaking Gardens by the Bay. It started with Lee planting a tree in 1963, a tradition he never failed to keep. Singapore's transformation into a city in a garden is testimony to Lee's determination to achieve anything he set his mind to, even when it meant defying nature. To Lee, Singapore's well-manicured green landscapes testify to its ability to deliver consistently.
So without having to tell anything to the CEO, I knew that he would understand that when I say we will deliver, he knows that we can deliver. That this is a country where the administration works, where there is a system, because you can't just plant a tree and walk away.
Atau rasa lemah. Adakah Singapura?
Keenly conscious of his young nation's vulnerabilities, Lee grabbed every opportunity and every platform to remind Singaporeans about them.
Shower on them what you didn't have.
He'd written in his memoirs, "We had said that an independent Singapore was simply not viable. Now it was our unenviable task to make it work." He turned his National Day rally into a television broadcast to reach as many Singaporeans as possible.
And year after year, you make speeches and you keep on pushing buttons, nothing happens. So, I'm emigrating. We've got one little island, 600 square kilometers. You unwind this, you will not drop down on soft paddy fields. It's hard concrete, your bones are broken, and it's kaput. And you know that Singapore has only one chance
and that is to go up. Tighter, more discipline, up the ladder. You unwind this. It's curtains for everybody.
Against the backdrop of Singapore's multi-ethnic makeup, Lee was conscious of how intolerance could unravel the nation's delicate social fabric. His government pursued a deliberate ethnic integration policy. He insisted that everyone should be treated as an equal and came down hard on anyone who stirred up issues of race, language, or religion.
And let there be no mistakes about it. Whoever governs Singapore must have that iron in him, or give it up. This is not a game of cards. This is your life and mine.
After we became independent, the point which he always reiterated was never do to the minorities in Singapore what happened to us when we were a minority in Malaysia. Always make sure that the Malays, that most Indians have their space, can live their way of life, and have full and equal opportunities.
I, Lee Kuan Yew, having been appointed to the office of Prime Minister, do solemnly affirm
Lee had more than fulfilled his oath to Singapore.
to the Republic of Singapore,
And when it was time, he could hand over to his successor a nation no longer frail, but prosperous and thriving.
I hope I've helped to consolidate Singapore's advance in economic growth and social development. More important, I hope I have got together a core group of younger ministers who can make for continuity of honest, effective, and responsive government.
I, Lee Hsien Loong,
Leadership renewal became an institutionalized process in the PAP,
office of Prime Minister, do solemnly affirm
with leadership changing hands peacefully from one prime minister to the next. Lee continued to contribute to Singapore. He did this as an elder statesman to further Singapore's interest in the world and as the persuader of Singaporeans on domestic issues.
And your values, if I knew what my career would be.
感谢大家，感谢你们。
Lee Kuan Yew stepped down from the cabinet after the 2011 general election. His legacy, the thriving Singapore of today.
Could I have lived my life differently? Maybe yes, but probably not. At each stage, I made what was then the best choice. Having taken that decision, I had changed direction and there was no turning back.
We end today's remembrance event with words from the Prime Minister of Singapore, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong. I quote, "But even as we mourn his passing, let us also honor his spirit. Let us dedicate ourselves as one people to build on his foundations, strive for his ideals, and keep Singapore exceptional and successful for many years to come." Unquote. Thank you. So this is the end of today's event. For some of us who intend to proceed to join the queue, please proceed orderly. I understand this morning the official also advised not to join the queue because it's building up quite fast this morning. I'm not sure of the situation now because the queue has extended all the way now to Raffles City side here. So just follow the instruction as you join the queue. Thank you for joining today's event.